The aroma of fresh bread drifted through the quiet house before sunrise, wrapping itself around memories that had almost disappeared. An old man sat alone at the dining table, staring at an empty chair across from him. Every morning he set 2 plates out of habit, and every morning he quietly put one away without saying a word. Upstairs, his son adjusted the cuff of an expensive suit while preparing for another day of billion-dollar decisions. He believed money solved problems. His father believed time did. Neither realized that before the week ended, one woman with a warm smile and extraordinary kindness would change both of their lives forever. But here's the question that changed everything. Can a simple homemade meal heal wounds that years of silence could not? Stay with me until the very end, because this unforgettable story will remind you that love often arrives wearing an apron instead of expensive clothes. If stories that touch your heart inspire you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who believes kindness still exists. Now let the story begin. On the quiet edge of the city stood the elegant Hawthorne estate, a mansion admired by everyone who passed it but understood by almost no one who lived inside it. The stone walls were flawless, the gardens perfectly trimmed, and luxury filled every room. Yet despite its beauty, the house carried a loneliness that echoed through every hallway. 34-year-old Ethan Hawthorne had built one of the country's fastest-growing technology companies. Newspapers called him the silent CEO, because interviews with him were painfully short, business meetings rarely lasted longer than necessary, and employees often joked that a smile from Ethan was rarer than winning the lottery. They admired him, they respected him, but no one truly knew him. After his mother's passing nearly 8 years earlier, Ethan slowly buried every emotion beneath endless work. Success became his shield, silence became his language. The only person who still waited patiently for the old Ethan to return was his 78-year-old father, Arthur Hawthorne. Arthur had once been a cheerful history teacher who believed every dinner should last at least an hour because conversations were just as important as food. His late wife, Margaret, had filled their home with laughter, handwritten recipes, and Sunday traditions that made ordinary days unforgettable. After Margaret died, Arthur stopped cooking. Not because he couldn't, because every recipe reminded him of her. Now he survived on restaurant deliveries and frozen meals prepared by housekeepers who changed every few months. The food was expensive but empty. It filled his stomach, never his heart. One rainy Monday morning, Ethan received a call from the estate manager while reviewing a billion-dollar merger. "Sir, your father barely touched his dinner again." Ethan didn't look away from the contract. "I'll talk to him tonight." "You said that yesterday." "I know. And the day before." Ethan closed his eyes. "I know." When the call ended, he stared through the office window overlooking the city skyline. Hundreds of people depended on his leadership every day. Yet somehow, he couldn't even convince his own father to eat. That evening Ethan arrived home after 10 o'clock. The mansion was silent. Arthur sat in the living room reading an old cookbook. "You skipped dinner." Arthur smiled gently. "I wasn't hungry." The doctor said. "The doctor worries too much. You've lost weight." Arthur looked toward a faded photograph of Margaret smiling in an apron. "I miss food that tastes like someone cared." The sentence struck Ethan harder than any business failure ever had. "I hire the best chefs." Arthur nodded. "They cook beautifully." "So what's wrong?" "They cook for money." Arthur slowly closed the cookbook. "Your mother cooked because she loved us." Neither man spoke for several moments. Finally Arthur whispered, "There's a difference." That night Ethan barely slept. For the first time in years, spreadsheets couldn't solve the problem sitting inside his own home. The following morning Ethan instructed his assistant to search for someone different. Not a celebrity chef, not a luxury caterer, someone who understood comfort food, someone who cooked like family. Dozens of applications arrived within 2 days. Professional resumes, 5-star restaurant experience, television appearances, awards. Ethan rejected every single one. Then, buried beneath polished applications, one simple handwritten letter caught his attention. There was no glossy portfolio, no famous references, just neat handwriting. "My name is Lily Carter. I have never worked in a luxury home. I owned a small neighborhood bakery with my grandmother before she passed away. Since then I have cooked for elderly neighbors who cannot prepare meals for themselves. I believe every meal tells someone they matter. If given the opportunity, I promise to cook with my whole heart. No exaggeration. No boasting. Just honesty. Something about those words refused to leave Ethan's mind. He arranged an interview. The next afternoon Lily arrived wearing a simple blue blouse, dark trousers, and comfortable shoes. Her chestnut hair rested in a loose ponytail, and she carried a small woven basket instead of a designer handbag. She looked around the grand entrance with quiet amazement but showed no greed. Only curiosity. The estate manager welcomed her into the kitchen where Ethan already waited. He barely looked up. You've never worked for wealthy clients. No. You've never managed a staff. No. You've never prepared meals for formal banquets. No. Ethan finally raised his eyes. Then why should I hire you? Instead of becoming nervous, Lily smiled softly. May I ask you a question first? He frowned. I suppose. When was the last time your father smiled during a meal? The room became silent. Ethan didn't answer. Because he couldn't remember. Lily continued. People don't remember the most expensive dish they've ever eaten. They remember who sat beside them. Ethan folded his arms. My father refuses to eat. Then maybe he isn't hungry for food. What does that mean? Sometimes people are hungry for company. Those words lingered long after the interview ended. Against every logical business instinct he possessed, Ethan hired her. Arthur first met Lily the following morning. She found him sitting in the garden feeding small birds. Instead of introducing herself immediately, she quietly sat on the nearby bench. The birds continued eating without fear. After several peaceful minutes Arthur smiled. Most people scare them away. My grandmother always said birds know gentle people. Arthur chuckled. Smart woman. I think so too. Only then did she introduce herself. I'll be cooking here for a while. Arthur sighed. I've scared away 6 chefs already. I didn't come to impress you. No, I came to make breakfast. Arthur laughed for the first time in weeks. It was only a small laugh. But inside the mansion it sounded enormous. Lily entered the kitchen. She ignored expensive imported ingredients arranged like museum displays. Instead she searched quietly through cupboards until she found flour, eggs, butter, herbs, onions, carrots, and fresh chicken. The housekeepers exchanged confused glances. One whispered, "Is she really making soup?" Another replied, "For breakfast." Lily simply smiled. Not soup. She prepared warm homemade biscuits, fluffy scrambled eggs with herbs, roasted tomatoes, and cinnamon apple compote. On the stove simmered rich chicken broth that filled every corner of the mansion with memories. Arthur slowly entered the dining room. He stopped walking. His eyes filled with tears. The smell. It was Margaret's Sunday kitchen. He sat without speaking. Lily placed the plate before him. I hope it's close. Close to what? She answered gently. Home. Arthur lifted the first bite. Closed his eyes. Then another. And another. Within 15 minutes, the plate was empty. The housekeepers stared in disbelief. One quietly wiped away tears. Arthur looked toward Lily. Would you mind sitting while I finish my tea? She smiled. I'd like that. Upstairs Ethan prepared for work. He glanced downstairs. His father was talking. Actually talking. Not answering questions. Not forcing conversation. Laughing. The sound froze Ethan where he stood. He couldn't remember the last time he heard genuine laughter inside that house. Without realizing it, he smiled. Only for a second. But it was real. Days passed. Then another week. Arthur began requesting meals instead of refusing them. Lily learned his favorite desserts. His stories about teaching history. His habit of pretending not to enjoy sweets before secretly asking for another slice. The mansion slowly changed. Fresh flowers appeared on tables. Windows stayed open longer. Music quietly played while meals were prepared. Even longtime employees seemed happier. Kindness spread through the house faster than anyone expected. Ethan noticed everything. He simply never mentioned it. Every evening he returned late. Every evening dinner waited. Every evening Lily left before he sat down. Almost as though she respected the invisible walls he had built around himself. One rainy evening traffic delayed Ethan until nearly midnight. He expected everyone to be asleep. Instead he found a covered plate waiting in the kitchen. Beside it rested a handwritten note. Long days deserve warm meals. Heat this for 3 minutes. Please don't skip dinner. Lily. For a long moment, Ethan simply stared at the note. No employee had ever left him a message like that. No one had reminded him to eat in years. He warmed the meal. It wasn't elaborate, just herb-roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, vegetables, and fresh bread. He took one bite, then another. The flavors weren't extraordinary because of expensive ingredients. They were extraordinary because they tasted cared for. For the first time in years, Ethan didn't eat while answering emails. He sat quietly at the kitchen table, alone, yet somehow, not quite as lonely as before. He looked again at the little handwritten note, folded it carefully instead of throwing it away, and slipped it into the inside pocket of his suit jacket. He didn't understand why. He only knew that something inside the silent CEO had shifted ever so slightly. And somewhere upstairs, Arthur watched from the hallway with a knowing smile. For the first time since his wife's passing, hope had returned to the Hawthorne estate, not with grand speeches or dramatic promises, but with the comforting aroma of homemade food, a gentle heart, and a woman who believed every meal could remind someone they were loved. Neither Ethan nor Lily realized that this quiet beginning was about to awaken feelings, secrets, and challenges that would test them in ways they never imagined. And before either of them could admit what was growing between them, the past would come knocking at the mansion's door.